It was Christmas Eve and the city was glowing with lights, music, and laughter. Snow gently covered the sidewalks and families hurried home with gifts tucked under their arms. Warmth was everywhere except where Ethan and Leo stood. The twins were only 9 years old. Their jackets were too thin, their shoes soaked from melting snow. Ethan held his stomach quietly, pretending he wasn't hungry. Leo wasn't pretending anymore. They stood in front of the largest mansion on the street, staring through the tall iron gates. Inside, a massive Christmas tree sparkled, surrounded by wrapped gifts and a long dining table filled with food. Ethan whispered, "Maybe we shouldn't." Leo shook his head. "If not tonight, then when? It's Christmas." They had lost their parents 2 years ago. Since then, shelters, cold streets, and empty nights had become normal. Christmas Eve was the hardest because it reminded them of what they no longer had. With trembling hands, Leo pressed the doorbell. The chime echoed through the mansion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. The door slowly opened, revealing a tall man in an expensive coat. His hair was silver at the temples, his expression tired and distant. This was Richard Hale, a billionaire known in the city for his wealth and his cold heart. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. Ethan swallowed. "Sir, we're sorry to bother you. Leo gathered his courage. "We're not asking for money. Just some food, anything." Richard frowned. His eyes scanned their worn clothes, their red noses, their shaking hands. Something flickered in his gaze. Annoyance, maybe pity, but it vanished quickly. "There are shelters," he said. "You shouldn't be here." Leo lowered his head. "They're full, we tried." Silence hung heavy in the cold air. Behind Richard, laughter echoed from inside the house. Guests were arriving. A warm glow spilled from the doorway, brushing against the twins' frozen faces. Richard hesitated, then he sighed. "Wait here." The door closed. Ethan grabbed Leo's sleeve. "Do you think he'll come back?" Before Leo could answer, the door reopened. A maid stepped out holding a small bag. "Take this," she said gently. Inside were sandwiches, cookies, and 2 cups of hot soup. Leo's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." As they turned to leave, Ethan suddenly stopped. He stared at Richard. "Sir, do you believe in miracles?" Ethan asked softly. Richard stiffened. "What?" Ethan met his eyes. "Because tonight feels like one." Richard didn't answer. He watched as the twins walked away into the snow, 2 small figures disappearing into the darkness. He closed the door, but something inside him refused to close. That night, for the first time in years, Richard Hale couldn't enjoy Christmas. And he had no idea that those 2 homeless twins were about to uncover a secret buried deep in his past, one that would shatter everything he believed about himself. The mansion gates closed behind the twins with a heavy metallic sound that echoed through the cold Christmas air. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Lily clutched her brother Noah's hand tighter, afraid that if she let go, this warm place might disappear just like everything else in their lives. Inside, the mansion felt unreal. Golden lights, towering Christmas trees, the smell of roasted food filling the air. It was a world they had only seen through shop windows. Their worn shoes sank into the thick carpet as a butler led them forward, his expression unreadable. At the end of the hall stood a long dining table, covered with dishes meant for dozens of guests. And at the head of the table sat the man who owned it all, Richard Hale. Billionaire business tycoon, a man known for his cold heart and iron rules. He looked up slowly, his sharp eyes landing on the twins. "So," Richard said, folding his hands, "these are the children who dared to knock on my door." Noah swallowed hard. "Sir, we're sorry. We just needed food." Lily said nothing. She stared at the floor, her stomach aching, not just from hunger, but from fear. Richard studied them in silence. He had seen beggars before, hundreds of them. But something about these 2 was different. They stood straight despite the cold, despite the hunger, despite the fear in their eyes. "How old are you?" Richard asked. 12, Noah replied. "She's 11. "And your parents?" Noah hesitated. Lily squeezed his hand again. "They're gone," Noah said quietly. A faint flicker crossed Richard's face, but it vanished just as quickly. "Feed them," he ordered the staff, "then send them away." The servants hesitated, surprised, but obeyed. Plates were placed in front of the twins, real food. Warm food. Lily stared at it like it might disappear. "Eat," the butler whispered. They did. For the first time in days, they ate without rushing, without fear someone would steal it. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she chewed. Noah tried to hide his shaking hands. Richard watched from a distance, pretending not to care. But something tugged at him, an old buried memory. A night long ago, 2 children, snow falling, a choice that changed everything. As the twins finished eating, Richard stood. "You've had your meal," he said coldly. "You can go now." Noah nodded, standing quickly. Lily followed. But as she turned, her eyes met Richard's for the first time. And Richard froze, those eyes. They were familiar, too familiar. For a split second, the room seemed to fade away. He saw another face, years younger. A woman standing in the snow holding 2 babies, begging him not to walk away. Richard clenched his jaw. "Wait," he said sharply. The twins stopped. Richard stepped closer, his voice lower now. "What's your last name?" Noah answered, unaware of the storm building inside the man. "We don't use one anymore." Richard's heart began to pound. "And your mother's name?" he asked. Lily looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Anna. The plate slipped from a servant's hands and shattered on the floor. Richard staggered back as if struck. Anna. The name echoed through his mind like a gunshot. His hands trembled. "No," he muttered. "That's impossible." The twins exchanged a confused glance. Richard looked at them again, really looked at them. Their hair, their expressions, the shape of their faces. The truth, long buried, began clawing its way to the surface. And suddenly, Christmas Eve was no longer just another night. It was the night his past had come knocking on his door. The mansion's massive dining hall felt unreal to the twins. Crystal chandeliers glowed above them, reflecting off polished marble floors. Long tables were filled with food they had only seen through restaurant. Windows roasted turkey, warm bread, steaming soups, desserts piled high. For a moment, Lily forgot she was cold. For a moment, she forgot she was homeless. Noah gripped her sleeve nervously. "Lil, what if they change their mind?" he whispered. Before she could answer, a tall man in a dark suit stepped forward. His face was stern, but his eyes lingered on the twins longer than necessary, especially on Noah. "You can eat," the man said quietly. "No one will stop you." The twins sat. They ate slowly at first, afraid the food might disappear if they moved too fast. But warmth spread through their bodies, and soon their fear turned into relief. Lily felt tears burn behind her eyes as she tasted real food for the first time in weeks. Across the room, the mansion's owner, Mr. Richard Hale, watched silently. A billionaire, powerful, respected, and deeply broken. His wife had died years ago. His only son had vanished on Christmas Eve 20 years earlier, taken during a charity event when Richard had stepped away for just minutes. The case was never solved. Since then, Christmas meant nothing to him. Until tonight, Richard's gaze fixed on Noah's wrist. A thin silver bracelet peeked out from beneath the boy's sleeve. Richard froze. His breath caught. He stood up so suddenly that the chair scraped loudly across the floor. The room fell silent. "Where did you get that bracelet?" Richard asked, his voice tight. Noah flinched. I found it," he said softly. "At the shelter?" "Years ago." Richard walked closer, each step heavy, like his legs might give out. He knelt in front of Noah and gently lifted the boy's wrist. Engraved inside the bracelet were 3 small words. "Forever yours, R.H." Richard's hands trembled. That bracelet had been custom made. For his son. The room spun. "What's your birthday?" Richard asked, barely above a whisper. Noah swallowed. "December 24th. Lily felt her heart drop. Richard's eyes filled with tears he hadn't allowed himself to feel in decades. "How old are you?" 20. Richard staggered back. The timeline matched. The bracelet matched. The eyes, the eyes were his wife's. Security guards shifted nervously. Staff whispered. No one dared speak. Richard pressed a hand to his mouth. No, this isn't possible, he murmured. I buried you. Noah looked confused. Sir, my parents died when I was little. Richard shook his head slowly. No, he said. They lied to you. Silence fell like a storm. Lily stepped forward protectively. Whatever this is, she said, shaking, he's my brother, and he's not going anywhere. Richard looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time that night he smiled through his tears. You're right, he said. He's not. Outside, snow began to fall, and for the first time in 20 years, Christmas had found its way back into the mansion. The twins sat silently at the long dining table, plates untouched in front of them. The food smelled rich and warm, roasted chicken, fresh bread, creamy soup, but neither of them lifted a spoon. Their eyes kept drifting toward the hallway where the guards had taken the old man. Something felt wrong. Liam leaned closer to Noah and whispered, Why did he look at us like that? Noah swallowed, like he'd seen a ghost. Minutes passed. The mansion, once full of music and laughter, now felt heavy and still. Even the guests seemed uneasy, speaking in hushed voices, sneaking glances toward the staircase. Finally, the old man returned. But he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a woman in her late 50s, pale and shaking, clutching a framed photograph so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her eyes were red as if she had been crying for years and just now remembered why. She stopped the moment she saw the twins. The frame slipped from her hands and hit the marble floor with a soft crack. The photograph inside showed two little boys, twins, sitting on a hospital bed, their arms wrapped around each other, both wearing tiny wristbands with the same last name engraved beneath. The woman covered her mouth. It's them, she whispered. Henry, they're alive. A murmur swept through the room. Henry Vale, the billionaire, felt his legs weaken. He grabbed the back of a chair to steady, himself as memories he had buried. Decades ago, clawed their way back to the surface hospital corridors. Beeping machines, a nurse shouting, papers signed in a rush, and a fire that was supposed to have ended everything. He looked at the twins again. The same eyes. The same birthmark behind Noah's ear. The same scar above Liam's eyebrow. The woman stepped forward slowly, tears streaming down her face. What are your names? She asked gently, afraid that speaking louder might break them. Liam, one said. Noah, the other replied. Her knees gave out. She would have fallen if Henry hadn't caught her. Those names. She had whispered them every night for 20 years. The guests stood frozen as the truth began to take shape in the air. Heavy, impossible, undeniable. Henry turned to the guards. Clear the room, he said, his voice trembling. Now. Within minutes, the mansion was empty except for a handful of trusted staff. The twins and the woman who couldn't stop staring at them, as if afraid they might disappear again. Henry led them down a quiet corridor to a locked room at the end of the hall. He opened it with a key he hadn't used in years. Inside were shelves of files, old reports, newspaper clippings, burnt photographs carefully restored and framed. This room, Henry said slowly, is where I buried my sins. The twins exchanged nervous glances. Henry took a deep breath. 20 years ago, my wife and I had twin sons, you. The room went silent. We were told you died in a hospital fire. We were shown remains. We were broken. The woman stepped closer to Liam and Noah, her hands shaking as she reached out but stopped herself, afraid to touch them. But the fire was no accident, Henry continued. It was a cover. Someone wanted my children gone, and I believed the lie because it was easier than questioning it. Noah's voice trembled. So we didn't die? Henry shook his head, tears finally falling. You were stolen. Sold into the system, lost. Liam clenched his fists. We grew up on the streets. The words hit like knives. The woman let out a broken sob. I searched, she cried. I never stopped searching. Henry fell to his knees in front of them. One of the richest men in the world, humbled beyond repair. "I failed you," he said. "But I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life making this right." Outside, snow began to fall softly against the mansion windows. And for the first time in 20 years, Christmas didn't feel empty. But the story wasn't over yet, because someone else knew the truth, and they weren't finished watching. The room fell into a heavy silence after the old man's confession. No one spoke. Not the billionaire. Not the doctors. Not even the guard standing near the door. The girl stood frozen, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. All her life she had searched for answers about her past, about her mother, about why she had been abandoned. And now those answers were standing right in front of her, wrapped in power, money, and guilt. "You're lying," the billionaire finally said, but his voice trembled. "I wish I were," the old man replied quietly. "But the night she disappeared, you were there." The billionaire clenched his fists. His eyes drifted toward the hospital bed where his son lay unconscious, machines breathing for him. "That doesn't change anything," he said coldly. "My son is dying. That's all that matters." The girl stepped forward before she could stop herself. "No," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "It changes everything." Every head turned toward her. "You took my mother's life," she continued. "And now you're asking the world to save yours." The billionaire's jaw tightened. "You have no proof." She swallowed hard and reached into her bag. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a small, worn notebook, its edges torn, its pages yellowed with time. "My mother kept a journal," she said. "She wrote everything down, names, dates, places." The old man closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. "She wrote about you," the girl said, opening the notebook. "About a powerful man who promised to protect her, then silenced her when she knew too much." The billionaire's face drained of color. "That journal disappeared the night she vanished," he whispered. "I found it in an orphanage basement," the girl replied, "hidden inside a box with my name on it." The billionaire staggered back as if struck. "You don't understand," he said desperately. He grabbed his coat, slipped the drive into his inner pocket, and exited through the back door of the shop. The alley was dark, wet, and silent. He moved fast, every sound amplified in his ears. He didn't notice the second vehicle until it was too late. A door slammed shut behind him. "Stop." The voice was calm, professional. He turned slowly. Two men stood there, dressed in black, faces empty of emotion. "You've been carrying something that belongs to us," one of them said. "Hand it over and you can go home." The shopkeeper swallowed hard. "And the girl?" A pause. Then the man smiled. "There is no girl." Something snapped inside him. "She's alive," he said. "I saw her. I spoke to her." The smile faded. "Then you've seen too much." Before they could move, a sharp sound cut through the alley. A siren. Red and blue lights reflected off the wet walls. The men cursed under their breath and vanished into the shadows like smoke. The shopkeeper stood frozen as a police car rushed past. Only then did he realize something terrifying. Emily had wanted this to happen. She had planned for him to be followed. She hadn't just given him proof. She had turned him into bait. And somewhere beneath the city, she was counting on him to finish what she couldn't. As the sirens faded, he looked down at the drive in his pocket and made a decision. That would change everything. He wasn't going to hide anymore, even if it cost him his life. The room was silent, not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses against your ears until your heart feels too loud. Everyone stood frozen as the final evidence played on the large screen. Documents, hidden footage, medical reports that had been buried for years. The billionaire's hands trembled. This can't be real," he whispered. But it was. The poor girl, now standing tall in front of him, was no longer just a stranger with a story. She was the missing piece that explained everything he had lost, and everything he had become. "You paid millions to protect lies," she said calmly. "But you ignored the truth when it was right in front of you." His son, pale but awake now, slowly turned his head. "Father," he said softly, his voice weak but clear. "She saved me." When everyone else gave up, tears filled the billionaire's eyes. For the first time in his life, money had failed him, and a girl with nothing had succeeded. He stepped forward, then stopped. "I mocked you," he said, voice breaking. "I laughed at your offer. I thought power meant control." The girl met his gaze. "Power means responsibility," she replied. "And you forgot that." The doctors lowered their heads. The lawyers said nothing. The truth had already won. Outside, cameras flashed as news spread across the city. "Billionaire exposed. Poor girl reveals hidden truth and saves his son." But inside that room, none of that mattered. The billionaire dropped to his knees. "I can't undo the past," he said, "but I can face it." The girl took a slow breath. "Then start by telling the world the truth," she said, "and by helping those you once ignored." Days later, the underground facilities were shut down. Victims were freed. Names long forgotten were finally spoken again. The billionaire donated everything connected to the crime. Hospitals were rebuilt. Lives were restored. And the girl? She didn't take money. She didn't ask for fame. She walked away quietly, knowing she had done what millions could not. As the sun rose over the city, the billionaire stood by his son's bedside holding his hand. "Sometimes," he whispered, "miracles don't come from power. They come from courage." And far away, a poor girl disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a truth that changed everything. The end.